So it's award season still. The NHL announced its 3 finalists for GM of the Year. And they are Edmonton Oilers' Peter Chiarelli, Ottawa Senators' Pierre Dorion, and Nashville Predators GM David Poile. People are going to take issue with this, of course. We'll load up the standings and just guess which fan bases are going to be upset. I'm going to go ahead and say Pittsburgh. Jim Rutherford, people are going to say, Pittsburgh was relatively, solid all year. You could argue regular season. You could argue Washington. They won the President's Trophy. You could argue their GM did a fantastic job. And again, all awards are voted on before the playoffs start, so it does not involve playoffs. Montreal had quite the bounce-back season. Of course, Toronto famously went from last place in the league to a playoff team. Columbus, best season they've ever had. Kekalainen definitely should be in the top 5. He's not in the top 3, but he should be in the top 5. Chicago, again, based on regular season success. Minnesota, that's why I'm kind of surprised Nashville's in there, because Nashville didn't have a great regular season. They played well, but like their last 10 regular season games, they were 5-4-1, so they were 500 down the stretch. It's not like they were, burning down the house on the way to the finish line or anything. They were okay, but they lost. They were 12 points ahead of Winnipeg at one point, and they ended up finishing 7 points ahead of Winnipeg. Like, they just got across that finish line, because Winnipeg in their last 10 games were 8-2. So, and then in the Pacific Division, you could argue Anaheim was run really well. But yeah, so it's Chiarelli, it's Dorion. Like, Ottawa had a good season. They did. But I do wonder about some of these other guys and whether or not they belonged in that top 3. If I had to pick which of the 3 is going to win it, I'd say Chiarelli. The Oilers have been out of the playoffs for a very long time. And the Chris Russell pickup worked for them. He did originally trade for Talbot. He came in at the right time. Chiarelli came in the start of the Connor McDavid era and really has helped Edmonton become relevant in the NHL, which they haven't been for years, over a decade, really. And if you really want to get technical about it, they haven't been relevant from a Stanley Cup contender point of view since the early 90s. I know they went on that run in 2006, but that was it was one of those Cinderella runs. They weren't considered a contending team that year. And the late 90s, early 2000s were a wasteland for them in terms of being in that upper echelon. And right now, the Oilers, with where they are, they look like they're going to be in that upper echelon of the West. I don't think anybody would be surprised if they finish first in the Pacific next year. I don't think anybody would be terribly surprised if they finish first in the West next year. Postseason could be something completely different, but with McDavid and Draisaitl and what they've put together and what they could still put together, it's intimidating. What the Oilers can do right now is intimidating. So, in terms of GMs, I think it'll go to Chiarelli. If it came down to who actually has done the best job, it's hard to argue against Chiarelli, really. Dorion, though, too, with Ottawa. Ottawa's got a lot better. But I'm a little surprised that Lamoriello didn't end up in there. Because, Toronto went from last to a playoff team. And some of the smart moves Lamoriello made were the moves he didn't make. At the start of the season, Brooks Laich off the team, Milan Mahalik off the team. They made it clear that the best players were going to play. It wasn't just going to be veteran guys with guaranteed contracts. And they played all their rookies. And it would have been easy for them to go out at the deadline and add a bunch of veteran bottom 6 guys to, who have playoff experience to push for it. And they didn't. They let the rookies have that experience. They brought in Brian Poile, and other than that, they didn't add a whole lot. And I could see Brian Poile staying in Toronto. I mean, they had a fun little run there in the playoffs. They extended Washington to 6 games, and for the first time in a long time, Toronto has a reason to be hopeful. So I'm kind of surprised Lamoriello's not in there. Kind of surprised Washington's GM isn't in there. But I can understand the 3 that are. Maybe the people who are voting just look at the Shea Weber for PK Subban trade and say that's fantastic. Nashville's, got a tremendous GM in David Poile. He deserves this award. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe with Dorion, maybe it's the moves he didn't make that made people say, oh, great GM. I mean, he grabbed Brassard and he traded away Zibanejad to get him. I still think long-term that trade favors the Rangers. I still think it's kind of a saw-off between the two right now. But Zibanejad in the playoffs lost to Brassard. That's one of those matchups. Whether it's a direct matchup or not, doesn't matter. It's still a measurement. And on that score, then the Ottawa Senators won that trade. So, and the way that Ottawa handled the Craig Anderson situation, they brought in Condon. Condon played great, and Condon was kind of a forgotten guy out of Montreal last year, and Pittsburgh didn't really need him, so they handed him off to Ottawa, but Ottawa was smart enough to pick him up. And he played a lot of hockey, Mike Condon. Played a lot this year, and he played really well. He was a big part of the reason that Ottawa ended up keeping that playoff spot warm for when Craig Anderson came back. So, and again, the GM does have something to do with that. Knowing the right moves to make and the right players to bring in, and sometimes knowing when to leave it alone and not to completely alter everything. Maybe Poile got some votes based on the fact that the Johansson-Jones trade has worked out relatively well for both sides. Again, though, I have a hard time with Kekalainen not being in the top 3. Kekalainen's done a very, very good job in Columbus. I mentioned Sam Gagner and the 17 free agents of 2017. He brought in Gagner for dirt cheap, and Gagner produced way beyond what he was being paid and seemed happy about it, seemed happy in Columbus. So Columbus with the best season ever, Kekalainen not being nominated does surprise me. Just based on regular season, we're not talking about postseason here. I think the one thing that's nice, of the 3 GMs named, 2 of them have teams that are still playing in the playoffs, which means that the voting came from people who seemed to understand what was going on with teams and who was probably best suited for playoff hockey going in. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And again, I know I got this facial hair thing going on. I don't like it any more than anybody else does, so I'm going to go deal with that crap. I'm going to watch Anaheim and Nashville. Only peace and love towards you people. I'm coming out of an illness, but either way, the internet's merciless, and I meant no disrespect for Johansson or Kessler in the video I did earlier, or for Ottawa earlier. My only comment towards Johansson is that when I hear players saying these things, all I think is, you're better off complaining to your teammates. Just don't complain to the press. Because here's the thing, and this is where I'll close this out, even though it's not related to the GM thing. Well, kind of. Smart GM does this too. Don't give the other team anything that they can put up on the board for inspiration. I can almost guarantee that Johansson's quote about, I don't know how Kessler's family and friends can cheer for him, I almost guarantee that's either up in his stall or it's up somewhere in the Anaheim locker room. And that his players are having a really good laugh about it. His teammates are really probably laughing pretty hard about it. And there may even be some that go up to his wife or other family members and say, we don't know how you can cheer for that prick either. And then have a laugh about it. It's you don't want to give fodder to the other team. You don't want to give them something to laugh about. you just don't ever want to do it. So that's the last note on that topic. On this topic, I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Who do you think's GM of the year? And thank you very much for watching. I will talk to you all again real soon.